Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. My name is Dana Whitlow. I'm 40. And the moment my ex called me his little renter reporter in front of our son's wedding guests, I knew I'd let a lie go too far. I stood there, watching Cole and Leah spin on the dance floor, the weight of everything finally catching up with me. They looked so happy, so right for each other. I wanted to be happy for them, but Kevin was in the middle of making his latest joke, and I could already feel the sting. He stood a few feet away, smirking, as he shouted over the music, "Yeah, Dana's a big shot reporter at the community center, rag? If you can call that real journalism." His voice was loud enough to draw the attention of the guests around us, some in-laws, some neighbors, and they all laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. My stomach dropped. I gave him the same answer I always did, calm as ever. "It's honest work, Kevin." He rolled his eyes, turning the joke into a full-on spectacle. "Oh, sure, it's honest work," he said, grinning, just like when she interviewed dog walkers for a living. I hated how he did this, how he made something I was proud of sound like a joke. I'd spent so many years in the shadows, doing work that mattered, while he treated it like I was stuck in some sad little corner of the world, writing about nothing. His new wife giggled, the sound light and fake, just like him. I stood there, trying not to let it show on my face, but the truth was, it hurt. I looked at the crowd, watching their smiles flicker as Kevin's version of me sank in. And for a second, I wondered if maybe I had let this go too far. I couldn't help but think back to all those years. How Kevin's joke about my community paper was the least of it? He never took me seriously, not when I got up at 5 a.m. to chase leads or stayed up all night piecing together a story. He never cared about the days I spent in freezing parking lots, hoping to catch a glimpse of some shady city councilman sneaking out of a meeting. Number. To him, I was just that lady writing about local bake sales and PTA events. In front of everyone, he still acted like he had the upper hand, like I was the punchline. And I let it happen. For years, I'd kept my real work hidden, buried under layers of small-town fluff. On paper, I was just a reporter for a local newsletter that barely scraped by, tied to some rundown neighborhood center no one cared about. Kevin thought I was the one who didn't care. He always laughed it off, making jokes about how I was writing puff pieces and chatting with dog walkers. He didn't know I'd been deep undercover, infiltrating nonprofits that were secretly funneling money into political PACs. How I'd spent days in dusty courtrooms, wearing disguises to expose corruption in the local government. No one knew, not even Kevin. At home, I lived in two worlds, the wife he thought I was and the journalist I actually was. And every time he cracked a joke, every time he mocked me in front of others, it chipped away at something inside. The lies piled up like stones in my stomach. I'll never forget Cole's graduation day. He was so proud of his achievements, standing there in his cap and gown, and all I wanted was for him to understand the work I'd done. But instead, he gave me that awkward smile, like he was trying to be supportive, but still didn't get it. "You know, Mom, I really admire you," he said, his voice softer than I'd expected. "You stuck with journalism, even if it never really went anywhere." It felt like I'd been punched in the chest. Never went anywhere. That's what my own son thought of my career. After everything, after all the risks, the stories, the people I'd protected, the lives I'd changed, to him it was just nothing. I thought I was doing something meaningful, that I was making a difference. But it hit me like a ton of bricks in that moment. Cole had absorbed Kevin's dismissal of my work. That lie I'd been living, keeping my real identity under wraps for the sake of my family's safety, had twisted into something worse. My son didn't even know who I was. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to scream that I'd been out there fighting battles he couldn't even imagine. But instead, I smiled. I told him I was proud of him, just like I always did, because I was. But it didn't change the fact that for years I'd been invisible, to my ex, to my son, to the world. And it stung. God, it stung. As I stood there watching Cole dance with Leah, I couldn't help but wonder how long I'd keep pretending. How long could I let Kevin's version of me define who I was? How long could I let everyone else believe the lie? 6 months ago, Cole told me over lunch that he was getting married. He'd been dating Leah for a while, an ambitious policy analyst who was as polished as her resume. Cole sat there with that proud grin, the one that had been growing ever since he landed that job in D.C. "You'll love her, Mom," he said, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose, his voice lighter than I remembered. She actually works in real media. Think tanks and all. The words hit me like a slap, but I kept my face neutral. Real media. The phrase echoed in my mind, sharp and cutting. It wasn't the first time someone had said something like that. Real media was the world where journalists wore ties and worked for big name outlets, where stories got coverage, where people actually listened. And me. I was just some woman writing articles about the local farmer's market, my work invisible, small, nothing worth thinking about. Leah smiled politely as she sipped her iced tea, then added, I've heard so much about you, Dana. Your work at the community center, so important. She meant it, I could tell, but her words were just another reminder of how little people saw. I wasn't just doing important work. I was doing my work, undercover, risking my neck to expose the rot festering in small-town politics and shady nonprofits. But to the world, I was still that woman with the byline in the free newsletter no one really cared about. I forced a smile, something I was becoming all too good at, and nodded. It's all part of the job, I said, keeping it light. But inside, the familiar sting settled in, sharper this time. It always stung. But that day, it felt worse. Maybe because it wasn't just a random stranger or Kevin making the joke anymore. It was Cole's fiancé, someone he clearly respected, and I could already feel the invisible wall between us, that growing distance. Cole had no idea what I actually did. Or if he did, he didn't care. He hadn't cared to ask, not once. Instead, he'd wrap me up in a pretty little box, Mom, the community journalist, and stuffed it on a shelf labeled, No Big Deal. That was the way Kevin had always seen me. And now, so had Cole. My son, who I'd sacrificed so much for, had absorbed Kevin's dismissal of my work and never even thought to look beyond it. It hit me hard, the weight of that realization. I'd been hiding in plain sight for so long, pretending like it didn't matter. But it did. It mattered more than I could admit. The truth was, I couldn't keep living like this. Not forever. At some point, I had to stop being the woman everyone thought I was and start being the one I really was. I thought about the wedding, the upcoming celebration where I'd have to face everyone, Leah's family, friends, all of them who'd no doubt hear Kevin's jokes about me, and Cole. God, Cole would probably just shrug it off, like he always did. Maybe he'd even chuckle along with his dad, not realizing how it felt to hear his whole life and career boil down to nothing. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to sit there, smile tight, pretending like I hadn't spent over a decade doing dangerous, unglamorous work that mattered, work that changed things. And I certainly wasn't ready to watch him stand by, nodding along to every word Kevin said, never questioning any of it. I knew something had to change. The wedding was going to be a breaking point for me, for all of us. The reception was in full swing, and I was still standing by the bar, pretending I wasn't overhearing Kevin's voice booming across the room. I could hear him now, regaling the group around him with the latest laugh at my expense. Did I ever tell you guys about Dana's big Washington Post application? Yeah, she once sent a resume there like it was going to get her a job at the real paper, Kevin said, his voice thick with mockery, as if he'd just told the greatest joke in history. The guests around him chuckled, some a little too loudly, others nodding like they got the punchline. Kevin leaned in, the smirk on his face wider than it had ever been. Oh, and by the way, Dana, she's deep throat in a denim jacket, just without the whole, deep part. I felt the sting like a slap, but I didn't react, not outwardly, not a muscle twitched. My face stayed locked in that same mask I'd been wearing for years, blank, unreadable, silent. But inside, the words cut deep, each one sharper than the last. Kevin wasn't just making fun of me, he was defining me. The fake reporter, the failed journalist, the joke, and everyone around us. They were eating it up. Their eyes shifted between me and Kevin, pity written on some faces, amusement on others. I caught a few of them stealing glances at me, as if they were concerned for my feelings, unsure if they should laugh or look away. The oh, poor thing look, like I was the one in the wrong, like I had to take it, like I had always been the punchline, and I had no choice but to accept it. And I'd done that for years, accepted it, but not tonight, not anymore. I pushed the chair out from behind me and stood up straighter, the weight of the room suddenly feeling suffocating. Without thinking, I walked toward Kevin, who was still basking in his own wit, his back to me as he continued entertaining the crowd. Kevin, I said, calm but firm, and he turned, raising an eyebrow. I need to speak with you, alone. His eyes narrowed, but the smile didn't fade. What? You're mad now? He glanced around at the group, expecting someone to laugh. When no one did, his smirk faded just a little. Okay, okay, he said, rolling his eyes like I was an inconvenience, humoring me. What's up, Dana? Did I hurt your feelings? I didn't say anything. I just turned, walking toward the back hallway, knowing he'd follow. The noise of the reception started to fade as we stepped into the quieter space near the photo booth. The tension between us thickened with every step. He had no idea what was coming, none at all. Kevin shoved his hands in his pockets, looking at me like I was the one being difficult. All right, what's the big deal? It's just a joke. I let the silence hang for a moment, feeling the anger bubbling under my skin. I couldn't let this slide. Not this time. I'm not laughing, Kevin, I said, my voice low but steady, and I haven't been for a long time. His smirk faltered. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, trying to read me. Oh, come on, don't be such a buzzkill. It's just a stupid wedding. People joke around, Dana. Don't you get that? I get it, all right, I shot back, not giving an inch. But here's the thing, Kevin. I've been lying to everyone for years. You. Cole, hell, even myself. I let you make a joke of my career for too long. But the joke's over. His brows furrowed, confusion spreading across his face. What are you talking about? You're still working for that tiny paper, right? The one no one reads. I took a breath, calm but burning inside. This was the moment, the one I had kept hidden for over a decade. I reached into my bag and pulled out the press pass. Not the one for the local newsletter, but the real one. The one that said I was a reporter for the National Bureau of Investigative Media. The words on it, the weight of it, the reality of what I'd been doing, it felt heavy in my hand. Kevin's face went pale as I handed it to him. He took it from me slowly, staring at the badge as if it might bite him. He read it twice, then his eyes snapped up to mine, disbelief in his voice. Wait, this is real. I nodded once. I didn't just interview dog walkers, Kevin. I've been investigating corruption, high-level stuff, nonprofits funneling money into dirty PACs, shady municipal deals, and I've been doing it all under aliases for years, real journalism. The words were out, and they hung between us like a grenade. Kevin opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. His face drained of color, and for the first time in years, I saw him actually struggle for words. I had no idea, he muttered, the bravado from earlier completely gone. But why? Why didn't you say anything? I shook my head, my voice tight. Because if I had, I wouldn't be standing here right now. My sources wouldn't be safe. Hell, I wouldn't be safe. His eyes flickered to the ground. He looked almost ashamed. God, he said quietly, I've been making jokes about you all these years, and this whole time, you were doing this. He swallowed hard. You were putting yourself at risk, and I treated you like a joke. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hall behind us, and I didn't need to turn to know it was Cole. He stood in the doorway, his face a mix of confusion and concern. Leah stood beside him, her expression frozen in shock. Is everything okay? Cole asked, his voice low, eyes darting between Kevin and me. I didn't answer. Kevin did. His voice cracked as he muttered, No, it's not. Kevin stood frozen, staring at the press pass in his hand like it might suddenly disappear. I watched him not saying a word, letting the weight of what I just revealed settle into the space between us. It felt good, finally telling him the truth, but it also felt like it might break everything I'd worked for. At first, Kevin scoffed, rolling his eyes, but I could see the doubt creeping into his face. Oh, come on, Dana, he muttered, turning the card over. This is some kind of joke, right? Is this some deep cover thing? I thought you were just writing about bake sales. His laugh was a nervous burst that didn't reach his eyes. Is this real? Or did you just print this up yourself? I leaned in, close enough to see the disbelief still written all over his face. Read it again, I said, my voice steady, though the lump in my throat was a hard thing to swallow. Kevin looked at it again, slower this time, and I could see the wheels turning. His mouth opened, but no words came out, just a sharp exhale of air, like someone had knocked the wind out of him. It was almost funny, in a way, watching him process it. This is real, he said finally, voice flat. Yes, I said. I've been working for the National Bureau of Investigative Media. That's not a fake ID, Kevin. I've been doing undercover investigative work for over a decade. And you? You've been making jokes about it the whole time. His face went slack. His lips parted in that stunned silence I knew so well. He looked at me like I was a stranger. Like I had been some character he'd made up in his head, not the woman who had been with him for all those years. You were working undercover this whole time, he asked as if the words didn't make sense. But, but you said you were writing for that community paper. Why didn't you? I had to, Kevin. I had to keep my cover. I said it flatly, but every word felt like it was stabbing at him. The community paper was just a front. It wasn't real, but the stories I was investigating were. That paper kept my sources safe, kept me safe. It wasn't some fluff piece about the best dog groomer in town. It was dangerous work. And I kept it quiet because if I'd told anyone, especially you, it would have put everything at risk. Everyone. I paused, letting the silence stretch between us. He just stood there, eyes wide, his face pale now, his confidence slipping away. The truth hit him, hard and fast. I could see him processing the years of jokes, the ridicule, all the times he'd called me a failure, a joke, every single one of those little digs, all the mocking laughter. It had been about something I was protecting, my identity, my safety, my work, the very thing that had kept me sane through everything, from our marriage to the divorce. Kevin's breath came in shallow bursts, and his hands twitched, unsure whether he should put the press pass down or keep holding it like it was a grenade ready to explode. I thought you were just... His voice cracked, and he stopped. He couldn't finish the sentence. His mind was trying to catch up with what I was saying. You thought I was just writing about the county fair? I finished for him, my words sharp. I know. I let you believe that. But you were laughing at something real, something that mattered. He shook his head like he was trying to shake off the last few seconds. But Cole didn't know. You never told him. I felt the breath leave my chest at that. No, Kevin. He never knew. And that's the hardest part. The pain in his eyes, the way his expression faltered for just a moment, that hit me harder than I thought it would. It wasn't just the embarrassment, the regret I was seeing. It was the realization that the lies I'd kept had somehow poisoned everything, even the relationship I had with our son. He doesn't know that his mom's been risking her life for over a decade, I said, my voice low, almost a whisper. He still thinks I'm some failed journalist writing fluff pieces for a newsletter that no one reads. I met Kevin's eyes. And that hurts more than anything you've ever said about me. The silence between us was thick now. Kevin opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. He just stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time, really seeing me. Finally, his voice came out in a strained whisper. You really kept all this from him. From everyone. Yes, I said, my throat tight, because there was no other way. I could feel the anger in my chest turning into something heavier now. I wasn't angry at Kevin anymore. Not really. I was angry at myself for letting it go on this long, for choosing to hide who I was, what I did. I thought I was protecting them, but all I'd done was protect a lie. God, Kevin muttered, rubbing his face with his hands. I've been telling people you were a joke. I know, I said quietly. I heard about it, from the grapevine. His head dropped. I could see the shame crawling over his face now. Jesus, Dana, I had no idea. I made fun of you. I made you the joke. His voice broke, just for a second. I didn't know. I know you didn't. I said it softly, and I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But the truth had been waiting a long time to come out, and it was too late for apologies now. The damage was done. The silence between Kevin and me hung heavy in the air when I heard footsteps behind us. I didn't need to turn around to know it was Cole and Leah. They were the only ones who would walk up like that, tentative and concerned, like they could feel the tension radiating off us. What's going on? Cole asked, his voice tight, scanning Kevin's face for answers. Leah was close behind him, her brows furrowed in the way she did when she was trying to figure something out. Kevin was still staring at the ground, rubbing his jaw, like he was trying to process what had just hit him. I'm fine, he muttered, but the edge in his voice said otherwise. Cole glanced between us, his lips pressed together in a thin line. He didn't have to say it, but I could feel him trying to change the subject, to smooth things over. Hey, Dad, maybe we should go get some air. No, I cut him off. My voice was calm but firm. No more changing the subject. It's time. I took a deep breath, then pulled out the press pass again, the real one, and held it up in front of them. Cole blinked, his eyes narrowing as he stared at it. Mom, you don't have to pretend. I get it. I know it's a big night, but I shook my head, cutting him off. I'm not pretending, Cole. This is real. I held the press pass out to him and Leah, keeping my voice steady. I didn't just write for the community paper. I worked for National Bureau of Investigative Media, under aliases using pseudonyms, working with syndicate editors. I've been investigating corruption, lying to everyone for years to protect my sources. Protect us. Leah's eyes flicked from me to the press pass, then back to me again. She didn't say anything at first, but I could tell something was shifting. The words, the weight of them, were starting to hit her. Then she glanced down at the badge, and her eyes froze. She reached out slowly, reading the name on the ID. Wait, she whispered, a slow realization creeping up on her face. You're Elaine Wallace. I nodded. Her face went pale as she stepped back slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. You wrote the North Shore housing scam piece. My heart thudded, a sharp pain in my chest. Leah was silent, her mouth working to form words that didn't come. Then Cole spoke up, his voice barely audible. Mom, that article was part of my thesis. You wrote that. He looked at me like I was someone else, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. Yeah, I said quietly, looking him in the eyes. I wrote that. And I've written dozens of others just like it. Cole didn't say anything for a moment, his face still locked in shock. Leah looked at him, then back at me. They were both silent, the pieces of the puzzle starting to click into place in a way neither of them seemed prepared for. I took a breath, steadying myself. I've been working undercover for over a decade, Cole. I've exposed corruption in small-town government, nonprofit organizations that were laundering money, and political PACs that were rigging elections. All of it. Every story, every investigation was done under false names, pseudonyms. And the work was real. It was dangerous, and it mattered. I paused, letting it sink in. They both looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language, eyes wide, mouths slightly agape, processing everything that had just been dropped on them. Cole shifted on his feet, looking like he wasn't sure whether to sit down or run. He took a breath, looking at me like I wasn't his mother anymore. I don't get it, Mom. Why didn't you tell me? I swallowed hard. Because telling you would have put you at risk, Cole. Telling you would have meant exposing everything. My sources, the people I was protecting. And sometimes, keeping quiet is the only way to keep the truth from destroying everything. Leah opened her mouth to say something, but stopped, then whispered, Wait, you're telling me you wrote that article about the North Shore housing scam, the one that got picked up nationally, the one that... She stopped, clearly trying to wrap her head around it. That was you. I nodded again. That was me. And there's a lot more I can't talk about. The syndicate I worked for has strict confidentiality rules. Some stories are still classified. But yes, I've been risking my life, my safety, everything for work that never had a name attached to it. Not until now. Leah seemed frozen in place, her thoughts scattered. But Cole looked different, stunned. He didn't even know how to process what I'd just said. You wrote that for real? Cole asked again, like he still didn't believe it. He had cited that article in his thesis, the one that had blown the whistle on a local real estate scheme that had been defrauding dozens of families. The same article that had led to a federal investigation. His voice wavered as he added, You risked all of that, and I had no idea. I nodded again, feeling the weight of it press down on me. I never wanted to lie to you, Cole, but sometimes the truth has to stay hidden, even from the people you love, to protect them. I couldn't have told you because you didn't need to know. I kept it secret for your safety, for everyone's. Cole didn't speak. He just stood there, staring at me with this look in his eyes I hadn't seen before. And Leah just blinked, almost like she was trying to digest the enormity of everything I'd said. She opened her mouth, closed it again, and then finally whispered, This is huge, Dana. Your work, it's incredible. I didn't know what to say to that, but Cole's voice broke the silence. I'm sorry, Mom. I had no idea. He sat down slowly, his hand running through his hair as the weight of the moment settled in. Neither of them seemed to know what to say, so I let them sit with it. Let them see it. After all these years, all the lies, all the sacrifices, I had nothing left to hide. For the first time, I was finally being seen. Leah was the first to break the silence, her eyes wide with admiration. She wasn't just impressed, she was floored. Dana, she said slowly, taking a step closer, your articles. They were instrumental in 2 local investigations. The housing scam, obviously, but the other one, the police corruption case in North County. That was all you, wasn't it? I nodded. That was me too. Her eyes went wide as she processed the gravity of what I was saying. Those investigations, they led to actual arrests. You've been doing this for years. I mean, really doing this. Her voice was almost reverent now. Kevin sat nearby, still silent. He hadn't said anything since I'd dropped the bomb on him. He looked. Well, he looked like a man who was coming to terms with the fact that everything he'd ever believed about me was wrong. His hands were folded in his lap, eyes unfocused. I could feel him struggling, wrestling with the truth, but he wasn't ready to face it. Not yet. Cole cleared his throat, shifting in his seat, his voice barely a whisper. You were doing this the whole time. During the marriage, during the divorce, all the jokes. His eyes locked onto mine, and I could see the confusion in them, like he was still piecing it all together. Yes, I said, my voice steady but carrying more weight than I wanted it to. During the marriage, during the divorce, every time Kevin made a joke about me being a community blogger or fake reporter, I was doing real work. I had to keep it hidden to protect my sources, to protect all of you. Even my own son didn't know. Cole's face twisted for a moment, like he was struggling with the idea. Then he asked the question I knew had been coming. Why didn't you ever say anything? I met his eyes. Because my work required secrecy, Cole. One exposure of an alias, one slip-up, and a whistleblower could get hurt. The people I worked with, they depended on me to keep quiet. You don't get to be in this line of work without learning to protect everyone, even if it means staying hidden in plain sight. Kevin's head jerked up then, and he muttered under his breath, almost to himself. God, I told everyone you were a community blogger, a local journalist. I looked at him, meeting his gaze for the first time in what felt like forever. I know, I said, my voice low but steady. I heard about it. Through the grapevine. Cole winced like I'd slapped him, and Leah glanced between me and Kevin, her expression flickering between disbelief and sorrow. She wasn't sure what to say, how to process all of this. But her silence spoke volumes. She was starting to understand just how deep this had run. Kevin opened his mouth to say something else, but then paused. The air between us was thick with everything left unsaid. I could feel it hanging there, thick and suffocating. I didn't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't this. I didn't expect him to shrink into himself, unable to muster the words to explain what he was thinking. But I'd always known Kevin would never understand. Not fully. I looked at Cole, his face now a mix of awe and confusion. It was hard, knowing he felt like he'd been kept in the dark all this time. But it wasn't about me anymore. It was about the truth and the people I'd protected. His truth. You don't have to apologize, Kevin, I said, my voice calm. I've heard the jokes. I've heard it all. But what matters now is that you know. And what matters is that Cole knows too. Kevin didn't respond. He just looked down at his hands, his fingers twitching in his lap. He didn't look at me, not directly, and I could tell he wasn't sure what to do with the information. Maybe he was too embarrassed. Or maybe it was because the person he thought he knew had just been dismantled in front of him. I'd spent so long hiding behind the lie, behind the idea that my family would never understand the work I was doing. But now, standing here, watching Kevin shrink under the weight of his own words, I realized just how much I had let the lie define me, and I couldn't do it anymore. Cole, I said quietly, taking a step closer to him, I'm sorry I kept this from you. But now that you know, maybe you'll understand why it had to stay secret. I didn't want you to carry the weight of what I was doing. He didn't answer, but his expression softened. He wasn't angry anymore, just stunned. Leah finally spoke, breaking the silence that had fallen over us. You're one of the most courageous people I've ever met, Dana. I can't even imagine what you've had to live with, what you've been through. She paused. Your work, it's incredible. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, I felt the full weight of what I'd been carrying for so long. The secret, the lies, the need to protect everything and everyone. finally they didn't feel quite so heavy. Maybe, just maybe, I was finally starting to be seen. I was still trying to process everything that had just happened when I saw Kevin walking toward the DJ booth, his face set in that same tight, controlled expression he wore when he was about to make some big theatrical move. He didn't even look back at me as he approached, just walked with a purpose. And before I could stop him, he was already talking to the DJ. "No," I said, my voice cutting through the buzz of the reception. But it was too late. Kevin had already grabbed the microphone. Hey, everyone!" His voice rang out, loud and sure, cutting through the music. The crowd, who'd been murmuring in small groups after everything that had just come to light, grew quiet, turning their heads toward him. Even Cole looked up, his eyes flicking from the DJ to his dad. I tried to move toward him, my heart racing. "Kevin, don't," I said, my voice low but firm, but he didn't hear me. Or maybe he just didn't care. "I need to say something," he announced to the crowd, and I could feel my stomach tighten. Everyone's been laughing at Dana for years, joking about her so-called journalism career. Hell, I've made those jokes myself. So let me clear something up, right here and now. He paused, looking out over the room, and the guests waited, some still unsure where this was going. The tension in the air felt thick, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the punchline. But Kevin wasn't going for the joke this time. He cleared his throat. "You see, Dana Whitlow," he said, his voice gaining strength, "is not some failed community blogger, like I've said in the past. She's a real journalist. A journalist who's risked her life to expose corruption in this country. Her work has actually made a difference, and it's time everyone knew that." He glanced down at me then, and for the first time all night, I saw something resembling respect flicker in his eyes. I didn't know how to feel about it. It was like he was peeling back the layers of everything he had once dismissed about me, and I didn't know if it was too little too late. But still, his words hung in the air, and I felt the weight of them in my chest. His voice grew louder, more deliberate. "Her stories have exposed crooked politicians, shady nonprofits, and corrupt city officials, things most people would never have the courage to even look at. Dana's work has been brave, impactful, and frankly, criminally under-recognized." I was frozen, still standing there in the middle of the room, watching him speak into that mic like he was making some grand confession. And for a moment, I wasn't sure if this was just some twisted version of an apology or if he truly meant it. The crowd was silent at first, processing what he had said, and then it started. A slow, hesitant clap. Then it grew, a wave of applause that spread across the room, like the moment was finally landing, like they finally understood. I stood there, trying to keep my face neutral, but I felt my throat tighten, and for a split second, I couldn't breathe. Kevin cleared his throat again, his eyes now locking on mine. I owe Dana an apology, not just as an ex-wife, but as a father. For all the years I've belittled her, for all the times I made her feel like her work didn't matter, I was wrong. I felt the sting of it, the rawness of the apology, and I could see that Kevin was really struggling with it. But I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. And then, before I could process the full weight of what was happening, I felt Cole's hand slip into mine. His fingers wrapped around mine, warm and steady, grounding me as he leaned in close. "You didn't have to say anything, Mom," he said, his voice low, barely above a whisper, but it was full of something softer than I'd ever heard from him before. "But I'm so glad you did." His words hit me harder than anything Kevin had said. The applause from the crowd started to fade into the background, but in that moment, it was just Cole and me, his hand in mine, and I felt seen, really seen. Not as some joke or afterthought, but as the woman I had been all along, the one who had carried the weight of the truth on her own for so long. I squeezed his hand, fighting back the tears that threatened to blur my vision. It wasn't the applause that mattered, it was the look in his eyes, the understanding, the respect. I didn't need to be recognized by the world, not anymore. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I'd finally earned something real. The room around me slowly came back into focus, and I could hear the whispers, the murmurs of approval, but none of it mattered. I didn't need the world to validate me anymore. I had Cole, and I had my truth. And that, for once, was enough. The reception was over, but the night felt far from finished. Cole and I ended up in the hotel lobby, sitting together on one of those oversized couches that felt more like a trap than a place to relax. It was quiet here, but the world still felt loud, echoing with everything that had just happened. Cole stretched his legs out, staring ahead at nothing in particular. Mom, he said, voice soft, are you happy with what you do? The question surprised me, and I glanced at him. He wasn't looking at me, but I could feel the weight behind it, the weight of everything that had just come out. I'm proud, I said after a beat. Not everyone gets to do what I do. Expose corruption, help fix broken systems. It matters, Cole. I paused, letting the silence settle for a second. I might not be famous or rich, but I've made a difference. He shifted slightly, still not meeting my eyes. I wish I'd known sooner. It hit me, his words, just how much he had been kept in the dark, how much he had assumed. I swallowed hard, a lump forming in my throat. I wish I could have told you, Cole. But sometimes, hiding the truth is the only way to protect it. I had to keep you safe. I couldn't let anyone know, not when it would have put you or anyone else at risk. He nodded slowly, like he understood, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes, the hurt. He wasn't angry, but the years of silence had left their mark. Will you ever tell me more? He asked quietly, looking at me now, his voice almost hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he should ask or if I'd shut him down. I thought about it for a moment. Maybe a little, I said finally. Now that the most important part is out, maybe. Maybe I can share more with you, when the time's right. He let out a small, relieved breath, but before he could say anything else, I heard footsteps approaching. Leah rounded the corner, her eyes bright, her lips curving into that familiar smile. Elaine Wallace, huh? She said, her voice teasing, but with a kind of wonder in it. My mom is going to lose her mind when I tell her I met you. I couldn't help but smile at that. For the first time all night, I felt something that wasn't just the weight of secrets or the sting of years of being overlooked. I felt seen, really seen. Not as a joke or a failure, but as someone who had done something important. That's funny, I said, the smile lingering. I never thought I'd get to meet someone who was actually impressed by what I've done. Leah laughed, sitting down beside us. Trust me, you've got fans in the most unlikely places. My mom's going to want to hear all about you. I nodded, feeling a warmth spread through me. Maybe I'll tell her a little bit more. Maybe I'll tell her everything, eventually. And as I said it, it hit me again. This wasn't just about what the world saw anymore. It was about this, about finally being able to share what I had been carrying all these years, about letting the people closest to me understand, really understand who I was. I squeezed Cole's hand gently, feeling the weight of everything that had been hidden for so long, start to lift, even if just a little. I'm glad you're here, Cole, I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't invisible anymore. Like all the pieces were starting to come together, and for once, the truth felt like something I could stand tall in. Leah smiled at us both, and for the first time all night, it wasn't about the secrets or the lies, it was about the people who mattered most. And in that moment, I knew, this was the part of the story that mattered. My name is Dana Whitlow. I'm 40. For over a decade, I let my family believe I was a failed local journalist. Watching them realize the truth was like watching a wall crumble, slow at first, then in jagged chunks. There was a kind of weightlessness in it, like a heavy fog lifting. But the relief didn't come immediately. There was too much history, too much unsaid. The jokes, the dismissals, the years of being minimized. It didn't go away in an instant. It couldn't. The worst part was hearing Cole pity me. I hated that more than anything. He never saw me as anything more than what Kevin had made me out to be. The community reporter, the one who wrote fluff, never amounted to anything. When Cole had graduated and said he admired me for sticking with it, despite it all, I had swallowed it, tried to smile and be proud of him for his success. But all I could think was, how could you not see me for what I really am? The applause at the wedding had been nice, yeah. But the real prize was the look in Cole's eyes, the way he finally saw me, the way he understood, even if just a little bit, what I'd been doing all these years. That was worth more than any award or headline. Recognition has always been a luxury. People think it's the point of the work, the applause, the acknowledgement, but that's never been the point for me. For years, I didn't care about being noticed. I cared about exposing the truth, about getting the story out there, even if no one ever knew my name. But that night, the truth came out, and that was all I really needed. You don't have to wear a badge or carry a gun to take down the powerful. Sometimes all it takes is a notepad and a name no one knows is yours.